What if I told you that the mysterious fear you've had since you were a kid, the skill that felt super easy for you, or that weird feeling like you've been somewhere before even though it's your first time there? What if these weren't just random weird things about you, but actual memories coming through from lives you've already lived? Edgar Cayce was a famous person called the Sleeping Prophet who gave over 14,000 special readings where he could see things others couldn't. He didn't just say that reincarnation, living more than one life, is real. He told thousands of specific, detailed stories about people's past lives. And more importantly, he found patterns, regular signs that show up in your life now as proof of your previous lives. And what makes his work so amazing isn't just the huge number of cases he wrote down, but how accurately he showed how past life experiences show up in your life today. The fears you can't explain, the talents you never learned in school, the relationships that feel old and deep from the very first moment you meet someone, the places that pull you toward them for reasons you can't put into words. According to Cayce, these aren't accidents. They're clues your soul has left for you to follow back to who you've been before. Have you ever met someone and felt like you've known them your whole life? Ever gone to a place for the first time but somehow knew where things were? Ever had a fear that makes no sense based on anything that's happened to you? Or maybe you've always loved a certain time in history or a certain culture without knowing why. These experiences might not be random at all. They might be your soul trying to tell you something. About trips you've already taken, stay with me, because what Edgar Cayce discovered about the signs of past lives will either finally explain those mysterious parts of yourself you've never understood, or help you see patterns you never knew were there. If you've had experiences that made you wonder if you've lived before, drop a comment and share them. Sometimes just talking about these experiences helps us understand what they really mean. And if you're ready to discover the surprising signs that you've lived previous lives, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're exploring mysteries that could completely change how you understand yourself. Now, let me show you Edgar Cayce's most powerful evidence that you've lived before, signs that are probably showing up in your life right now. The memory that isn't a memory, it all starts with what Cayce called spontaneous knowing. This is when you have detailed knowledge about something you've never studied in school, never been taught, never had any reason to know. This goes far beyond just making a good guess or having a hunch. This is the child who speaks in perfect sentences about ancient civilizations they've never learned about in school. The person who sits down at a musical instrument for the first time and plays it like they've been practicing for years. The person who visits a foreign country and knows their way around streets they've supposedly never seen before. Cayce wrote down hundreds of cases where people showed knowledge or abilities that simply couldn't be explained by anything in their current life. And his readings always pointed to the same reason: soul memory from previous lives. But here's what makes this really fascinating and provable. These aren't fuzzy feelings or unclear impressions. Cayce's subjects would give specific, concrete details about historical time periods, locations, and practices that they had no way of knowing about through normal means. Details that could be, and sometimes were, proven true through historical research. A woman who had never studied ancient Egypt described specific burial practices that weren't confirmed by archaeologists until years after her reading. A man with no musical training could identify and play unusual medieval instruments he'd never seen. A child described how the streets were arranged in a European city he'd never visited, and his description matched historical records of how that city looked hundreds of years ago. Think about your own life for a moment. Is there something you just know without being able to explain how you know it? A subject that feels familiar even though you've never studied it formally? A skill that came surprisingly easily even though you had no reason to be good at it? Cayce would say, this isn't talent or lucky genes. It's soul memory. You know these things because you learned them before in previous lives. Your current personality might not remember the specific experiences, but your soul remembers. And sometimes that memory breaks through into your conscious mind as spontaneous knowing. The key sign, according to Cayce, is the quality of the knowledge. It's not just general interest or natural ability. It's detailed, specific knowledge that feels like remembering rather than learning. When you study this subject or practice this skill, it doesn't feel like getting new information. It feels like coming home to something you already knew. The fear you can't explain. The second major sign Cayce found is what he called karmic phobias. These are intense, irrational fears that have no basis in your current life experience, but which made perfect sense when traced back to traumatic deaths in previous lives. We're not talking about normal caution or learned fear responses. We're talking about paralyzing terror that makes no sense. The person who has never had a bad experience with water, but is absolutely terrified of drowning. The person who's never been in a fire but has nightmares about burning. The child who's never been anywhere near a weapon, but has intense panic attacks when they see knives or swords. In Cayce's readings, these irrational fears almost always trace back to how the person died in a previous life. The person terrified of drowning had drowned in a past life. The one afraid of fire had died in flames. The child panicking at the sight of blades had been killed by a sword in a previous life. But here's what makes this more than just an interesting theory. Cayce's readings often included specific details about these past life deaths that explained not just the fear itself, but particular aspects of how the fear showed up. A woman with an intense fear of being trapped in small spaces had, according to Cayce, been buried alive during a plague in medieval Europe. But her fear wasn't just about enclosed spaces. She specifically panicked when she couldn't see a clear way out. This exact detail made sense given the specific nature of her past life death. She had been awake when she was buried, and had desperately tried to find a way out. Another person who couldn't stand to have anything around their neck, no scarves, no turtlenecks, no necklaces, had been hanged in a previous life. The fear wasn't general anxiety. It was specifically triggered by anything that touched the throat area where the rope had been. Now, regular psychology would explain phobias as learned responses to traumatic experiences, or as symbols of deeper psychological issues, and certainly some fears do start that way. But Cayce pointed out that karmic phobias have distinct characteristics that set them apart. They're often present from early childhood before any traumatic experience could have created them. They're highly specific rather than general, and they often include details that don't make sense unless you understand the past life context. Do you have a fear that you've never been able to explain? A phobia that seems way too big compared to any actual danger you've faced? Something that terrifies you even though you've never had a bad experience with it. According to Cayce, your soul might be trying to protect you from something that killed you before. The fear isn't irrational from your soul's point of view. It's a warning system based on very real, very traumatic past life experiences. If you're recognizing fears in yourself that you've never been able to explain, share your experience in the comments. Sometimes understanding that a fear might have past life origins helps us work with it more gently, rather than judging ourselves for being irrational. And if your reflection shows real self-awareness, I'll mark it with a heart to acknowledge your courage in exploring these deeper patterns. The instant recognition. The third powerful sign Cayce identified is what he called soul recognition. This is when you meet someone for the first time but feel an overwhelming sense of familiarity, as if you've known this person your entire life, or even longer. This goes beyond simply liking someone or feeling compatible. This is the experience of meeting a stranger and feeling like you're reuniting with someone you've known forever. The conversation flows easily. You finish each other's sentences. There's a mysterious comfort and trust that normally takes years to develop, or sometimes the opposite happens. You meet someone and feel an immediate, powerful dislike or discomfort that you can't rationally explain. You haven't done anything to each other in this life, but something about this person triggers a deep, gut-level response. According to Cayce's readings, we travel through multiple lifetimes with the same soul group, a collection of souls who are born together repeatedly, playing different roles in each other's lives to help each other grow and learn. Your mother in this life might have been your sister in a previous life, your child in another. Your spouse might have been your business partner, your closest friend, or even your enemy in other lifetimes. Cayce wrote down many cases where people felt instant recognition upon meeting, and his readings revealed they had shared multiple previous lifetimes together. The recognition wasn't just emotional. People would sometimes share the same memories of past life experiences without having discussed them beforehand. But here's what's particularly striking about soul recognition. It often comes with a sense of unfinished business. You meet someone and feel not just familiarity, but a pull to work something out with them, to complete something that was left undone, to heal something that was broken. The relationships that form from soul recognition are often the most significant in your life, for better or worse. They are the relationships that challenge you most deeply, teach you most powerfully, and stick with you most persistently. They're the ones you can't quite walk away from, even when it might be easier to do so. Cayce emphasized that soul recognition serves a purpose. We don't randomly encounter past life connections. We encounter them when there's karmic work to be done, lessons to be learned, or healing to occur. The instant recognition is your soul's way of saying, pay attention. This relationship matters. There's something important here. Think about the most significant relationships in your life. Was there a sense of recognition when you first met? Did it feel like you were picking up where you'd left off rather than starting from scratch? Or on the flip side, have you met someone who triggered an immediate negative response that seemed way too strong for anything they'd actually done? These aren't accidents. According to Cayce, your soul is recognizing other souls you've traveled with before, and the intensity of your response shows the significance of your shared history. The geographic homesickness. The fourth sign Cayce identified is what he called geographic soul memory, an intense, unexplainable pull toward certain places, cultures, or time periods that you have no logical connection to in your current life. This is more than just finding a place beautiful or interesting. This is feeling homesick for a place you've never been. This is arriving somewhere for the first time and feeling like you've returned rather than arrived. This is the sense that a particular culture or historical period is yours in some fundamental way, even though you have no family connection or personal connection to it in this life. Cayce's readings revealed that we often are born in the same geographic regions repeatedly, drawn back to locations where we've had significant experiences in previous lives, and our current personality keeps a kind of cellular memory of these places that shows up as deep, emotional resonance. The person who's always been obsessed with ancient Egypt despite having no Egyptian heritage. The person who weeps upon seeing photographs of Ireland even though they've never been there. The child who insists they're from Japan despite being born and raised in America. According to Cayce, these aren't random preferences. They're soul memories calling you back to places where you've lived before. But geographic soul memory includes more than just attraction to places. It includes the strange experience of arriving somewhere for the first time and knowing your way around. Recognizing buildings or landscape features that shouldn't be familiar. Feeling deep sadness or joy in specific locations without understanding why. Cayce wrote down cases where people visited places from their past lives and experienced spontaneous memories suddenly, remembering what streets used to look like, where buildings once stood, how the landscape has changed, details that were later proven true through historical records or archaeological evidence. One of the most compelling aspects of geographic soul memory is what Cayce called historical homesickness, feeling like you were born in the wrong time period, that you belong to a different era. This isn't just romantic nostalgia or dissatisfaction with modern life. It's a deep sense of displacement, of being temporally out of place. The person who feels deeply connected to the Renaissance, who dreams in that period's imagery, who feels most themselves when engaging with that era's art, music, or philosophy. The person who has an unexplainable affinity for ancient Rome, who can visualize its streets and buildings with clarity that goes beyond anything they've studied. Cayce would say, these temporal displacements are your soul remembering when and where it felt most alive. most purposeful, most fully expressed. You're not romanticizing a different time period. You're remembering living in it. Is there a place on Earth that calls to you with an intensity that seems irrational? A culture that feels like it should be yours even though it isn't in any regular sense? A historical period that feels more real to you than your current time? These pulls might be more than preferences or interests. They might be your soul trying to reconnect with experiences and identities from previous lifetimes. The prodigy pattern. The fifth sign Cayce identified is unexplained mastery. When someone shows a level of skill or talent that far exceeds what their training and experience in this life could account for, we often explain exceptional talent as genetics or fortunate brain structure. But Cayce's reading suggested something else. Child prodigies and savants aren't just genetically lucky. They're souls who developed specific abilities to high levels in previous lifetimes and kept access to that skill when they were born again. The child who composes symphonies at age 5. The young artist who paints with the sophistication of a master despite minimal training. The person who becomes fluent in a foreign language with shocking speed. These aren't just talented individuals. They're souls who are remembering rather than learning. Cayce distinguished between natural talent, which everyone has to varying degrees, and retained mastery, which indicates past life development. Natural talent requires normal learning curves and practice. Retained mastery shows up as abilities that bypass the usual developmental stages. The key indicator is the speed and ease of mastery. Someone with retained mastery doesn't struggle through the beginner stages. They skip them entirely or move through them with impossible speed. They show understanding of advanced concepts before they've been taught the basics. They perform at levels that should require decades of practice after only minimal exposure. But here's what Cayce emphasized. Retained mastery comes with a sense of remembering rather than discovering. When these individuals engage with their area of mastery, it doesn't feel like they're learning something new. It feels like they're remembering something they already knew. Cayce also noted that retained mastery often comes with specific stylistic preferences that seem old-fashioned or from another time. The young musician who's drawn to Baroque compositions and performs them with unusual authenticity. The child artist whose style mirrors techniques from specific historical periods. The person whose approach to a craft matches methods that were common centuries ago, but aren't widely taught now. This isn't just artistic preference. It's soul memory of how they practiced this craft in previous lifetimes. But retained mastery isn't limited to arts and music. Cayce wrote down cases of people with unexplained ability for healing, teaching, building, leading, or other practical skills that showed up with a completeness and sophistication that exceeded their current life's training. Do you have an ability that came surprisingly easily to you? A skill where you skipped the normal learning curve? Something you can do with a level of mastery that seems way too good compared to how much you've actually practiced? This might not be talent in the regular sense. It might be your soul accessing abilities you developed over multiple lifetimes, bringing forward skills that took hundreds of years to develop. The relationship pattern. The sixth sign Cayce identified is what he called karmic relationship dynamics. When you find yourself in the same types of relationships repeatedly, playing out similar patterns with different people, or experiencing relationship challenges that seem to go deeper than normal psychology. This goes deeper than simply having a type or repeating relationship mistakes due to psychological patterns formed in childhood. Cayce's readings revealed that souls often work through the same relationship lessons across multiple lifetimes, encountering the same challenges and dynamics until they're finally healed and integrated. The person who repeatedly finds themselves in caretaker roles, always sacrificing their needs for others, might be working through karma from lifetimes where they were served by others and failed to appreciate or give back that service. They're now experiencing the other side of the dynamic to develop compassion and understanding. The person who consistently attracts partners who betray or abandon them might be balancing karma from lifetimes where they were the betrayer. They're experiencing the pain they once caused to understand its impact and develop real commitment. But here's what makes karmic relationship patterns particularly compelling. They often include specific repeated details that go beyond general dynamics. It's not just I always attract narcissists. It's I always attract partners who initially seem perfect, then gradually reveal a specific pattern of controlling behavior around finances. Cayce noted that these specific details often match circumstances from past life relationships. The controlling behavior around finances might echo a past life, where the person lost everything due to a spouse's financial recklessness, creating a soul pattern around money and trust that plays out repeatedly until it's resolved. The key to recognizing karmic relationship patterns, according to Cayce, is the feeling of inevitability and repetition. No matter how much therapy you do, how much you work on yourself, how consciously you choose differently, the pattern keeps showing up. That's because the pattern isn't just psychological, it's karmic. But Cayce also emphasized that karmic patterns aren't punishments. They're learning opportunities. Each time it happens gives you another chance to respond differently, to make different choices, to heal what was wounded in previous encounters with this dynamic. The pattern stops repeating when you finally learn the lesson it's trying to teach. When you develop the quality or understanding or boundary or forgiveness that the soul needs to integrate, then the pattern naturally dissolves because it served its purpose. Are there relationship dynamics that keep showing up in your life no matter how much you try to change them? Patterns that seem to go beyond psychology or personal history? Challenges that feel ancient and familiar, even when the specific people are new? These might be karmic patterns your soul is working through. Lessons that span multiple lifetimes, finally seeking resolution in your current life. The body knows. The seventh sign. Cayce identified as somatic memory. When your physical body carries memories and patterns from previous lifetimes that show up as unexplained physical symptoms, birthmarks or bodily sensations tied to past life experiences. This is one of the most controversial, but also most provable, of Cayce's claims about past lives. He consistently reported that birthmarks, chronic physical ailments, and unexplained physical sensations often corresponded to injuries or deaths from previous lifetimes. A child born with a birthmark on their throat might have died from a throat wound in a past life. Someone with chronic pain in a specific area of their body might be carrying somatic memory of an injury from a previous life. Unexplained physical symptoms that doctors can't diagnose might be the body remembering trauma from other lifetimes. Cayce's readings included many cases where people's current physical issues traced back to past life causes. A woman with chronic breathing problems had died from smoke inhalation in a fire in a previous life. A man with persistent digestive issues had starved to death during a famine. A child with lower back pain had died from a spinal injury in another lifetime. What makes this particularly compelling is that Cayce's readings often predicted that addressing the past life trauma would relieve the physical symptoms. And in many documented cases, this is exactly what happened. People who explored and processed their past life deaths through various therapeutic techniques often experienced resolution of chronic physical problems that hadn't responded to regular medical treatment. But somatic memory extends beyond just ailments and birthmarks. It includes what Cayce called body wisdom, the way certain movements, postures, or physical practices feel mysteriously natural and familiar even when you've never been trained in them. The person who sits down to meditate for the first time and automatically assumes a complex yogic posture they've never seen. The person who practices martial arts and finds their body moving with knowledge that exceeds their training. The dancer who performs steps they've never learned but somehow already know. According to Cayce, your body remembers how it moved in previous lifetimes, especially movements that were practiced intensively or repeatedly. Your muscles might have cellular memory of practices performed thousands of times in other existences. Do you have unexplained physical symptoms that doctors can't find a cause for? Birthmarks that seem significant somehow? Physical movements or postures that feel strangely familiar, despite being new to you in this life. Your body might be carrying memories from your soul's previous journeys, physical imprints of experiences that happened in other lifetimes but left marks that go beyond death. The purpose that came before you. The eighth and perhaps most profound sign Cayce identified is pre-existing purpose. When you feel called to a specific mission or purpose that seems to have existed before you consciously chose it, as if you were born for this specific work. This goes beyond normal career interests or personal goals. This is the deep, unshakable sense that you came here to do something specific, that your life has a predetermined purpose that you're meant to discover and fulfill. Cayce's readings consistently revealed that souls choose their lifetimes intentionally, selecting specific life circumstances, challenges, and opportunities that will allow them to complete missions they committed to before being born. Your purpose isn't something you create. It's something you remember. The person who feels mysteriously called to a specific type of healing work, as if they've been doing it forever, even when they're just starting. The person who has always known they're meant to teach, create, or serve in a particular way, even before they had any training or opportunity to do so. This sense of pre-existing purpose often comes with specific knowledge about how to pursue it. You don't just feel called to healing. You have instinctive knowledge about specific healing methods that resonate deeply. You don't just want to create. You're drawn to particular forms of expression that feel like they belong to you. Cayce emphasized that these callings aren't ego or ambition. They're soul memory of commitments made before being born. Purposes that go beyond any single lifetime, but need completion in this specific life. The compelling aspect of pre-existing purpose is how persistent it is. No matter what obstacles arise, no matter how many detours life takes, the sense of purpose remains. It might be postponed, delayed, or temporarily forgotten, but it never disappears. It keeps calling you back until you finally surrender to it and begin the work you came here to do. Do you feel called to work or service that seems to exist independently of your conscious choices? A purpose that found you rather than you finding it? A mission that feels older than your current lifetime? This might be your soul remembering why it chose to be born this time, what it committed to accomplishing, what unfinished business from previous lives it came to complete. The truth that sets you free. As we reach the end of this journey through Edgar Cayce's Signs of Past Lives, I want to emphasize the most transformative insight hidden in this exploration. Understanding that you've lived before changes everything about how you live now. When you recognize that your current fears, talents, relationships, and purposes might have origins in previous lifetimes, suddenly nothing about your life is random. Your challenges have deeper meaning. Your gifts have ancient roots. Your relationships serve soul-level purposes. Your mission connects to commitments that go beyond this single life. This understanding brings both deep comfort and deep responsibility. Comfort, because your struggles aren't meaningless. They're part of a larger journey of soul development that spans multiple lifetimes. Responsibility, because recognizing past life patterns means you can finally work with them consciously rather than being unconsciously driven by them. The unexplained fear isn't something to be ashamed of. It's a message from your soul about trauma that needs healing. The instant recognition you feel with someone isn't foolishness. It's your soul recognizing a companion from previous journeys. The calling you feel toward specific work isn't grandiosity. It's soul memory of commitments made before this birth. But here's what Cayce emphasized most strongly. Understanding past lives isn't about living in the past. It's about understanding the present more deeply and choosing your future more consciously. Every pattern from past lives can be healed in this lifetime. Every karmic debt can be balanced. Every soul lesson can be learned. You're not trapped by your past life history. You're informed by it, empowered by understanding it, and free to make different choices based on that understanding. The signs of past lives that you've recognized in yourself aren't just interesting information. They're invitations to deeper self-awareness, opportunities to heal ancient wounds, and guidance about your soul's intended purpose in this lifetime. What will you do with this recognition? Will you explore these patterns more deeply, seeking to understand what your soul is trying to tell you? Will you work with the gifts you've carried forward from previous lives, developing them further in service of your current purpose? Will you heal the fears and relationship patterns that no longer serve you, breaking cycles that might have repeated for lifetimes? You're not just this one life. You're an eternal consciousness having a temporary physical experience. Understanding that you've lived before doesn't diminish this life. It enriches it with context, meaning, and purpose that goes beyond the limitations of a single lifetime. Your soul chose to be here now, in this body, in these circumstances, for reasons that might be connected to journeys you've already taken. The question isn't whether those past lives happened. The question is what you'll do with the recognition that they might have. Will you live more consciously, more purposefully, more courageously, knowing that this life is part of a larger journey? Will you take your callings more seriously, your talents more responsibly, your relationships more deeply? Will you heal what needs healing, develop what needs developing, and complete what you came here to accomplish? Edgar Cayce spent decades documenting evidence that consciousness survives death and returns in new forms. But the point of that evidence was never just to prove reincarnation exists. It was to help people live their current lives with greater awareness of their soul's eternal nature and evolutionary purpose. You have lived before. That's not a belief you have to blindly accept. It's a possibility you can explore through the signs appearing in your own life right now, and whether you've lived one previous life or hundreds. The question that matters most is this: what are you doing with the life you're living now? Because this moment, right here, right now, is where your soul's eternal journey is currently focused. And how consciously you live this moment determines not just your current happiness, but your soul's continued evolution across whatever lifetimes may come. The signs of past lives are signposts pointing toward deeper self-understanding. But understanding is only the beginning. What comes next? How you use that understanding to live more authentically, heal more completely, and serve more fully, that's entirely up to you. Your soul has been on a long journey, and it's not done yet. The question is, are you ready to participate consciously in that journey, or will you sleepwalk through this lifetime the way you might have sleepwalked through previous ones? Edgar Cayce gave you the signs to recognize. What you do with that recognition is the real work, and that work begins now.